Hello everybody, my name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you as always. We are going to start with a continued update on all things regarding Gaza and Palestine, including more attacks now on the West Bank city of Tulkarem, and much more in the way of atrocities and crimes put off by the genocidal Israeli government. Meanwhile, we will take a look at the really interesting reports coming out of the Washington Post today about how, and also many other places, this Inside Review had quite a lot to say about UNRWA and the allegations made against it of supporting October 7th by Israel, which led to a host of countries, including the United States, cutting off funding for the critical agency. Meanwhile, we will also be talking about rising tensions on college campuses over pro-Palestinian protests, including at Columbia. We're also seeing places at Yale. We'll give you some of the details on that, including calls apparently going on from, Israeli organizations looking for, quote, volunteers willing to wear keffiyehs and walk into these demonstrations masked, and individuals with Arabic-sounding names and Middle Eastern appearances that can be uniquely positioned for deeper infiltration and receive cash compensation. And we'll also be talking about Trump's hush money situation. All right, so we get started today with the latest with regards to this day 199 of the genocide here in reporting coming from Mondo Weiss. Israel has killed 139 Palestinians over the weekend, according to the Gaza-based Palestinian Health Ministry, announcing that 139 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes since Friday, while 251 others have been wounded. Meanwhile, in the northern Gaza Strip, Israel forces have bombed the north and east of the Gaza Strip, including the Zaytun and Sabra neighborhoods. And this is definitely telling and is relating, I think, in a lot of ways to what people have referenced when they talk about these low-intensity phases of the war, where the Israeli army will pull back in terms of troops. They will not expose their personal, men and women to Hamas attacks, but they will still kind of drop back and launch bombs very, very effectively, very, very disastrously over civilian targets. There's one thing nobody anywhere ever has said that the Israeli government does not know how to do, and that is drop bombs. So, especially again on these civilian targets, we've seen some pretty incredible videos over the weekend of just the moment when the bomb is dropped, like a second of the building before, and then you see the projectile landing and hitting it. That is similar to what we see in the first month or so of the post-October 7th period, where we had some people waiting around with the Israeli army massing troops up at the border, preparing for some sort of major strike, some sort of major operation. But meanwhile, bombing, especially Gaza City, back to the Stone Age, really, really horrific stuff. That was, has not stopped. More Israeli strikes were reported on the Barej refugee camp, where strikes hit a mosque and at a Zawadiyeh town, as well as targeting the top floor of Nasser Hospital in Deir al-Balah, causing extensive damage to the hospital's solar panels. So, you wonder what they're trying to hit there. I feel like they've always been, even when they've done some of their worst atrocities and some of their worst targeting to civilians, they've never said that, it was an accident, we misfired the bomb, except for the World Central Kitchen thing, which was just, too ridiculous to even to go into at the moment. But, they've always maintained, which is really what makes this so evil in a lot of ways. Yes, even during the 2008 situation where they were just sniping kids off and sniping people in wheelchairs, maiming people intentionally, especially kids, critically also targeting ambulance staff. They said afterwards that they know where every bullet lands, they know where every bomb falls, all of that. And, I think it's worth, taking them at their word and seeing that this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to wipe out, as we said, they're trying to, the main military goal, if you read this from what their actual military goal is, and something they've demonstrated time and time again, is making Gaza absolutely unlivable. So that people, want to essentially flee. and they don't want to be a part. They just want to completely abandon their homes because they think that is a better opportunity to provide for their families than they would ever receive here or where they are at the permanently. They would go to whether it be Egypt or whether it be Jordan or whether it be Europe or America. They just say, you know what, get me out of here. If you start looking at it from that's what Israel is trying to achieve, well, they're doing a pretty amazing job. They're not. I think they're really doing. That isn't to say that let me be clear. That isn't to say that I think that Palestinians are just one more bomb away from leaving. I think that any study of Palestinian history has shown that there's always going to be resistance as long as there's a single Palestinian remaining. Like it's part of the culture. These people just do not go down with the fight. They're incredibly resilient. So I think it's just a fact of life for the Israelis. But that this is something they're trying to achieve. They're going up to the point because there will be some that make what is a rational human decision and say, Gaza will still live, Palestine will still live, but my family may not live if I don't take the opportunity to get into Egypt, and that's what they want. This is the situation that they're trying to manifest with these strikes that have targeted so many different, just forces, and as they're doing this specifically with Gaza, especially in the hospitals, targeting every single aspect of Gaza's, civic life. They allowed one bakery to reopen. They bombed pretty much every single, whether it be, civilian infrastructure. It was one of the first things they targeted, civilian residences. They've targeted, police forces, people that were supposed to, distribute aid. They targeted aid seekers. They've targeted hospitals multiple times and, pretty systematically as well. So it's just like, this is something that is part of the Israeli policy, and it makes a lot more sense, because we're starting even to see when I was looking through the New York Times, there was like Israel has failed to achieve any of its war aims. Well, it's like maybe those weren't even really the war aims to begin with. Maybe if you listen to Israeli media, if you listen to the outrage in Israeli media that was caused by the photo of and the video of Gazans, washing their clothes on the beach and having a good time on the beach in the midst of just some of the worst trauma imaginable, they have said, this was probably the most disturbing image I've seen from the war. That was what a prominent commentator said on Israel's Channel 12. It's just like, according to a lot of these translations that have been, circling out there, it just gives you a little snippet of what is going on in Israeli society right now. And we've seen this from the very beginning when they announced a total and complete siege, meaning they would intentionally target civilians. So this is something that they have never been shy about. They've always gone on to say, and they are now, carrying out. And I think it's going to only be a matter of time before everybody else starts to realize that these are not, the destroying of Hamas and the reestablishing of security for Israelis. That was never the goal. That was never the intention of what the Israelis set out with by any reality. Not just of I'm looking at it from a pro-Israeli way. I'm not just I'm looking at it from a reality-based point of view. This is what actually happened. But no, if you look at it from what Israeli culture is saying internally, what the press is saying, what the commentators, what the actors, not even just that, but what the members of the Knesset, what the government members are saying, like the people who have the most power up and down are saying, we don't even care about freeing the hostages. We don't care about destroying every single little member of Hamas. We care about making sure that Gazans feel the pain, feel the suffering from what they did to us on October 7th. And that includes all Gazans, because there has been a boiling up culture of hate that has been going on in Israel for quite a long time. Meanwhile, UNRWA says 112 Palestinian children have been killed in the West Bank since October, and 14 more, by the way, Palestinians have been killed in Tulkarem. The Israeli raid, which started late on Friday, lasted about 52 hours, destroying much of the refugee camp's infrastructure. Israeli forces bulldozed many of the camp's streets, opened fire on houses, shattering windows and doors, according to residents' accounts to local journalists. Late on Thursday, the Israeli army announced that it began a large operation in the refugee camp, which is home to 11,000 residents within 2 square kilometers. The camp has been the center of local armed groups resisting Israeli forces since 2022, gathered under the name of the Tulkarem Brigade. Israeli forces have been raiding the camp on a regular basis, assassinating members of the resistance group and causing deadly casualties among the civilian population. Along with Jenin, Nablus, Tulkarem has formed a triangle of the Palestinian resistance in the northern West Bank. Israeli forces have concentrated their raids on these three cities since before October 7th, since well before October 7th. As we know, prior to October 7th, the West Bank was really like the center of all violence, and it was the deadliest year for Palestinian civilians yet on October 6th. Just imagine how it is now. With the killings of 14 Palestinians in their Shams, the Palestinian number of Palestinians killed by Israeli forces or settlers in the West Bank since October has risen to 486. And meanwhile, again, 112 Palestinian children have been killed in the West Bank since October, according to Philippe Lazzarini of UNRWA. All right, so speaking of UNRWA, we have a report saying that Israel has not provided evidence of widespread militancy amongst UNRWA staff. According to Israel. This is according to the Washington Post here. They say Israel has not provided evidence that significant numbers with the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees are tied to militant groups, but the agency must implement more robust vetting of staff members to ensure neutrality and work to reestablish trust with donors, said a highly anticipated report on Monday. So a very, very, this report was put together by an independent group that was put together by the UN in general, and they have essentially gone probably about as conciliatory as you can go, while still saying, there was no real evidence here. Not provided evidence that significant numbers of workers with UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees are tied to militant groups. And by the way, with those two or three, I think, it was like 13 that out of, again, 13,000 or 11 out of 13,000, former employees that caused pretty much all the main donors to shut off funding at the behest of the U.S., saying they need to really essentially do this to, I think it says, to reestablish trust with donors, according to this highly anticipated report that was, again, put together by the UN to investigate itself with, outside independent, group or whatever. No too much of the details and composition on that. Based on examination of the UNRWA's screening procedures, code of ethics, management structure, staff training, and other practices, the independent review group concluded the agency has established and updated a significant number of policies and mechanisms and procedures to uphold neutrality in recent years, but is in need of critical reforms. In the absence of a political solution between Israel and Palestinians, UNRWA remains pivotal in providing life-saving humanitarian aid and essential services, particularly in health and education, to Palestinian refugees in Gaza, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and the West Bank, said the report. So the findings released on Monday will largely come as relief to the embattled agency. Was pitched to an existential crisis in January after Israel alleged that, again, as it says here, with no evidence that a dozen of its 13,000 employees participated in the October 7th Hamas-led attacks. The agency was widely infiltrated by Hamas and other groups, saying, just again, the UN is Hamas, just like this meme at this point. So, throughout this whole thing, just kind of to put, this crisis, quote unquote, into perspective. And, I wonder how much of this was kind of coordinated between US and Israel ahead of time. They just come up with this random, when things are getting a little sour, I think, for Israel, public relations, really starting to turn about, attacks on UNRWA specifically, which Israel had been attacking from day one. We hear these reports that say, okay, 12 of the 13,000 employees in Gaza, the Gaza part of it, because there's, again, parts throughout the region of UNRWA, the Gaza-specific branch participated in the October 7th attack. And not only that, but there are up to 10% are straight-up Hamas members, as was reported in the Wall Street Journal. The Israelis later gave private evidence to the U.S., which was leaked out, which was essentially a page, again, the real dodgy dossier there, which essentially said that, these people, stating the names of the people that it had already, identified, that these people, according to phone records, which we have, but we have not attached to this document, those are the people that shows that they were on this side of the Gaza border fence. They were on the wrong side of the Gaza envelope on October 7th, showing that they participated. So, therefore, and based on evidence that, by the way, still has not been seen to anyone at any point yet, still has not provided any, there's no widespread evidence that it was literally 10% of all the people that were, in of the 13,000 in UNRWA participated in this attack. Like, there was no evidence of that. That was also widely spread around, and of course, literally hours after it drops. Oh, I remember what it was. It was literally the day of the ruling from the International Court of Justice saying there was a plausible case of genocide. Israel makes this accusation, with no evidence, very scant evidence, I guess you could say. There's a joke of evidence for the 13,000 people, for the 13 people, but then for the 10% allegation, it later, leaks to the WSJ, which, by the way, the person who wrote that for the WSJ, former member of the IDF, and, that's, was not disclosed at any point. There's no evidence for that. There's only this weak sheet that essentially just cites evidence but doesn't really reference it or, release the evidence that they're citing publicly. That's all the evidence they provided. This kind of further validates this. But I think the key point is the U.S. cuts off funding. Germany cuts off funding. I think EU has kind of signaled that they'd move a little bit more back around to it. But it really is really devastating stuff. So 16 major donors, including the United States, suspended funding worth about $450 million, which is nearly half of UNRWA's budget for the year. UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini immediately fired the staff members in question, a sign, he said, of how seriously he took the allegations. But Israel, long opposed to an agency that it sees as perpetuating the Palestinian refugee crisis and stoking anti-Semitism, called for UNRWA to be disbanded. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said in February, without providing evidence, that Israel had intelligence indicating that 30 UNRWA workers participated in the October 7th assault and that 12% of UNRWA's workers in the Gaza Strip, and it just upped it to 12. Just they're throwing numbers out there because they know, facts have no basis to what actually happens because there's no call on this to, back any of this stuff up. And still, there was a bill signed into law by Joe Biden, about a week or two ago that are saying it was prohibited for Congress or the United States to fund UNRWA in any way for a whole year. So it's just like it's not making any sense. It's not, correlating in any way to any standards of accountability, any standards of evidence, and what the biggest funder of UNRWA, which is the U.S., actually does. So this review body here was led by former French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna and a trio of Scandinavian research institutions. Did not examine accusations that some UNRWA employees took part in October 7th. Those claims are being probed separately by investigators from the Office of Internal Oversight Services, which is expected to release its own report later this year. In some ways, this was the higher stakes investigation, as several major donors, including Germany and Britain, have said its restoration of their funding to the agency rests on this assessment of its neutrality. The group spoke with more than 200 people, including senior UNRWA leaders across the region and officials from donor states, host countries, Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and Egypt during its 9-week review. The final report outlined a variety of measures, including staff training and investigation procedures the agency has taken to maintain neutrality and discipline employees who violate humanitarian principles. It also said UNRWA has mechanisms in place to prevent its facilities from being misused for political or military purposes, though called for more regular inspections. So again, really a comprehensive report, still doing a lot of kind of criticisms of UNRWA around the edges about things they could improve on, but they're all, essentially calling on UNRWA, if you notice, for the most part, to improve on things that they are already doing. Really an indication, these 13 or 12 people, whatever, UNRWA's funding shouldn't be suspended on the basis of, less than 1% of an organization's actions in general. But again, no evidence was provided for this, and no evidence was provided for any of the other claims, and it's just absolutely disgraceful. And this, the fact that Joe Biden has went along with this and, played along at the very least, perhaps even coordinated it with Israel, I think is one of the single, worst highlights of his long list of many, many crimes when it comes to Gaza on this, because he is just not, he's let them get away with murder. Like, this is the most essential organization of delivering aid. None of it has been appropriately distributed in this conflict, especially now that UNRWA is no longer a part of it. By the way, UNRWA has much deeper relations to the Strip and has been working there, employs Gazans, Gazans teaching other Gazans English, things like that. But there has been, no punishment or no accountability for Israel for making these crimes, and there's been no kind of inverse relationship. The funding that is being back on, being switched back on. Either way, the bottom line is there was really never any evidence of this, aside from, again, that very scant evidence, that piece of paper of the 13 members that was the original allegation. But, led by the United States, led by Joe Biden, the funding for UNRWA here was switched off in a really brutal way that made a big difference on the war effort and the aid distribution effort, most importantly, and was just fundamental to Israel's wildest dreams. And, it's caused suffering, and it's destroyed one of the most important agencies for Palestinians' rights and also Palestinians' ability to live. And it was done with no evidence at the complete behest of Israel, and was led by Joe Biden, and not only just stopped at the U.S., but spread to many other countries as well. So a really, really, one of Joe Biden's, I think, biggest black marks inside the black mark that is Gaza there. So very, very tough thing to come back from. And one of the many reasons why I will not be voting for him this November. Okay, so we're going now to our next story. And here is, just give you some of the latest, fill you guys in on all things going on with some of the campus protests. As New York Times has a story, turmoil gripped some of America's most influential universities on Monday as administrators tried to defuse campus protests while balancing the free speech rights of protesters and the fears of many Jewish students who said some demonstrations against the war in Gaza veered into anti-Semitism. As if that were not hard enough, lawmakers on Capitol Hill were watching intently, and some people who appeared to be unaffiliated with the university amped up the conflict, often with virulent anti-Semitic chants. Faculty members also got involved, with a large group of Columbia's professors criticizing the university's crackdown, while others demanded more protection. Others, meaning, Shai David here, which is really quite something. We'll get to that in a little. Demanded more protection for Jewish students. I'm sure he was a leader, not to say that there wasn't others involved in that. Nearly 50 people were arrested on a Monday morning at Yale University in Connecticut, where demonstrations continued into the afternoon. There were reports of encampments at universities in the Boston area, including at Tufts and Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and in some other parts of the country, including University of Michigan, although no arrests had been reported there. I believe there was a small Tufts encampment, so speaking from personal knowledge, for about 3-4 days, and then I think they, moved out after a certain point, to put up, I think, billboards in the President's Lawn, I think is the place where it's called, on campus. Well, I know it's actually the place where it's called on campus, but I'm following it from a distance at the moment. As the clashes at Columbia continued for more than 100 arrests on campus last week, the university announced classes would be conducted remotely on Monday and encouraged students to stay away. Protesters who had erected tents near the center of the campus vowed to press on. Essentially what's happening is it really has been an incredible movement of university students, starting with Columbia over the weekend. The boiling point came when the president, Manoush Shafiq, essentially said, we are going to send in the police. These people have been asked to move many, many times. They're not going to move. They're still standing out there chanting, kind of almost creating I hate to compare it to the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone because it seemed to be, a lot more peaceful, a lot smaller, a lot more productive. Just inviting a lot of, students. I've seen faculty. I saw Norman Finkelstein. I saw Cornell West speaking there. Essentially just, I hate to use the kind of college term, but holding space in the, main protest area for Columbia University campus and saying, we want the university to divest from any, Israeli ties that it may have. Support BDS, condemn what's going on in Gaza. Have the university that they are enrolled in play an active role in actually stopping this genocide. And by some accounts, we have definitely seen some pretty indefensible anti-Semitic chants coming, and I think it's been really, really incredible to see because we hear a lot from these concerned liberals. For example, there's one person saying, these people, there's, I think, some Columbia there's some, I don't know, I can't, because it's hard to tell here. This is the issue. Are these people Columbia students? Are they Columbia affiliated or not? But there were some Jewish students in relation to the campus, and then there was this woman who had, her face obscured in the keffiyeh, and Palestinian protesters have their faces obscured for very good reason, because if people figure out who they are, they're going to get suspended, they're going to get ostracized, whatever. And they had this woman holding a cardboard sign pointing at the Jewish students saying, these should be Al-Qassam's next targets. There was this woman who, I would know, did not look college age, shouting at these people, I think near a subway station or near kind of like a center. It seemed to be, on the sidewalk and on the, sidewalk side of a, campus gate, that there were going to be many more October 7ths to come and things like that. The leaders of this protest movement were pretty quick to come out and say, these people don't represent us. To our knowledge, they weren't a part of anything going on with the university. They're not affiliated with our movement in any way. We reject that totally. And, there was images coming out, there's videos coming out of, Shabbat services being held on the lawn, which I thought was really nice. Just all these, different cultures being celebrated. I saw this Indian dance that was being done on social media. They were filming it, and everyone was watching and cheering. It just seems like essentially a big kind of block party to a certain extent, but also very much, one done under threat of expulsion and suspension for these protests. I think that is, we see, again, all this, liberal kind of concern trolling about, these people need to do a better job of protecting their movements from bad actors and marshaling them out of the crowd. It's like, again, if there are people outside the university saying some ridiculous stuff, they should be condemned, and the university condemned them. I think and the students inside the university, the protesters condemned them as well. So I think it's not the fault of the students that these protesters or these idiots outside of the gates get lumped into what is normally it's a very, very effective protest, and also it's incredibly inspiring and rapidly spreading protests that's going across these campuses and encampments. I think NYU, the New School, a lot of places, specifically in New York City, and some chance also, of course, to unsuspend the students, even though the president is also facing calls of resignation. Meanwhile, it's hard to really break down. I think this needs some more reporting, but the Syrian Collective, which is a pro-Israel organization that was spotted by Waleed Shahid, who is the organizer for the Uncommitted campaign, formerly of Justice Democrats. He said, he pointed out the Syrian Collective, this is the tweet they put out, which was really remarkable. They said, breaking, Operation Global Insight, no more words. Join the Syrian Collective's first undercover operation. Become an agent embedded behind enemy lines at this weekend's protests, marking our first global operation that combines the efforts of volunteers with our more seasoned internal team. Who we're looking for? Individuals who can maintain cool, calm, and collected demeanors under triggering Jew hate and pressure. And by the way, think of who I just talked about. Mass people outside of Columbia's gates, spreading hate and getting on the news and getting very conveniently lumped in with the very peaceful protests and the very, protests with a large Jewish population that's holding Shabbat services inside their encampment. They're getting lumped in with, these certain people willing to wear keffiyehs and walk in these demonstrations and shout bad stuff that are masked. And the second bullet point on this tweet is they're looking for volunteers willing to wear keffiyehs and walk into these demonstrations masked. Individuals, and the third bullet point is here, individuals with Arabic-sounding names and Middle Eastern appearances may be uniquely positioned for deeper infiltration and receive compensation for their vital role in our operation. So this is a very, clear attempt, and, I don't know how real it is. It's not something that they have seen to be, they're not incredibly well known. But I think it's definitely something that, to keep an eye on, but I think it does not change the fact that anybody can come in to a campus area, say something anti-Semitic, and, it can get very easily taken in and lumped in with the media. But it's always very interesting to look for kind of other angles behind this as well. also with this story, this was a pretty remarkable moment. Shai Davidai, who's been a Columbia professor, I don't know exactly what he teaches, but has been very, very pro-Zionist, taking some of the Zionists supporting students in Columbia, and he essentially makes a big stand. He's called, multiple times, called recently for the National Guard to be called in on the students. He called, deep surveillance and expulsions and arrests of his pro-Hamas students or whatever he was trying to say. He essentially had a hissy fit and said, we're going to have a standoff where I'm going to march in and I'm going to, he tags all the top team of Columbia University and says, if you don't let me in, I'm going to, throw a fit and I'm going to get in real big trouble. I'm going to be real mad, which is really, it's pretty incredible stuff. So, he marches in with his pro-Israel squad to the gates, and he was like, you better have a police escort protecting me. I'm an employee of this campus. I have a right to be, visibly, Jewish, and also, by the way, stand into a protest with people that I've called, to be expelled, to be arrested, to have the National Guard brought in on them, who are also, by the way, my students. And, just nothing bad should happen. Everyone should protect me. So here he is trying to come into the room. The room. He's at the gates of the campus here, walking in. Let's take a listen to that. So now, he's just kind of walking out. It's boring. We'll skip ahead a little bit, but he goes in, and you can hear some of the commotion around it. But there's a big bunch of security officers. So yeah, you can hear in the background, this is kind of a bad sound on the video, but you can hear this woman just being like, oh my gosh, as Shai Davidai is going out to this crowd of both security and pro-Israel people, kind of half and half, saying that my card has been denied. This is an outrage. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. Oh, and then this is a very, I think this is a better scene. All right, we'll find a good one. Okay, so he's locked in. He's walked in here. This is after months of freaking out and kind of reaching his peak here by demanding to stand in front of the Gaza Solidarity campus, just holding his Israeli flag, being flanked by all these police officers because I have a right to do this at the school. And here's how it went in when he found out his card is being deactivated. Before you could hear the reaction of the crowd being like, "What? Oh my gosh!" But this is supposedly much better sound here.
Media in, is the university keeping the media out? This is the COO of the university.
And he's pointing at this bald guy.
Are we not letting the media
in a suit?
What? Can you back up, please? My card has been deactivated? Why? Can you back up, please?
This is actually him finding out now.
Everybody, my card has been deactivated. This is Cass Holloway, the COO. This is Gerald Lewis. They were in the meeting where I asked them if Hamas is a terror organization, and they couldn't say that it is a terrorist organization. Why? I'm a professor. Why can I?
Shai,
no. Speak out loud so the media.
Shai, we are willing to take you to the math lawn.
No, I am a professor here.
Alumnus. We have a
Whoa, everybody quiet. I am a professor here. I have every right to be everywhere on campus. You cannot let people that support Hamas on campus and me, a professor, not go on campus. Let me in now.
Let us in.
No. Are you not?
And he's just standing there with a sassy pose. He's like, when all the people support him and by chanting, he just stands at this admin guy with a little pose. And he's like, you see what's happening now? You gotta let me in.
No, you're gonna let me. No, you're gonna let me everywhere. You're gonna let me in any public space on campus. And you notice, if you are not allowed there, then you say that you're not allowed there. I am allowed there. And wait, no, listen to me now. You will listen to me. I rarely lose my. You know what? I wish you'd let me into my job.
Wait. We gotta rewind.
You know what? I wish you'd. Listen to me now. You will listen to me. I rarely listen. I rarely lose my...
I wish you wouldn't yell is what he
I
said.
wish you'd let me into my job. Everybody...
And he's saying, I rarely lose my temper. So yeah, just a really, still no word really on what he's been, suspended or deactivated for. Could be telling the administrators of the school to go fuck themselves if they didn't let him in. But, this guy who rarely loses his temper has his card deactivated in what is probably one of the best, Zionistic meltdowns that we've seen in a while on the gates of Columbia. Okay, this latest report from the Trump hush money trial here. Okay, so prosecutors in the first criminal trial of an American president began laying out their case for a jury of 12 New Yorkers on Monday, saying Donald J. Trump engaged in a conspiracy to cover up a sex scandal in order to get elected president in 2016. The first witness called was the tabloid publisher David Pecker, whom prosecutors described as one member of a three-man plot to conceal damaging stories, including a porn star's account of a sexual tryst as Trump mounted his bid for the presidency. Mr. Pecker was on the stand for only a few minutes in the afternoon before court adjourned for the day. He described how his publication, the National Enquirer, paid for stories, a practice he called checkbook journalism. He's expected to return to the stand tomorrow. Matthew Colangelo, this again reporting here from the New York Times, Jonah Bromwich and Ben Protest there to cite the authors. So Pecker essentially goes up on the stand, and one of the prosecutors tries to really pin this on this criminal conspiracy and cover up is what he calls it. Essentially tries to connect all the dots here, as we talked about in past shows, between Michael Cohen, Pecker, and this general campaign, this catch and kill campaign, which he is putting as a key part of the effort to influence the 2016 election. In improper ways, essentially. And one of them was this $130,000. This is really what it centers on, the $130,000 hush money payment that Cohen made to a porn star, Stormy Daniels, to buy her silence as the 2016 campaign was winding down. He apparently falsified business records, though, to conceal the fact that Trump falsified business records to conceal the fact that Cohen he reimbursed Cohen, which is another big part of the crime. Colangelo essentially said that Trump's willingness to go to all that trouble to falsify those business records shows just how important it was to him to hide the true nature of Cohen's illegal payments to Daniels and the overall election conspiracy that they had launched. Blanche, who is Trump's lawyer, I think his name is Todd Blanche, he attacked Cohen's credibility, saying he was unhinged at the moment, and that he essentially, which is kind of true, he's made a living off of attacking the president in the wake of his departure from the Trump White House. Essentially when they turned, he launched all these podcasts and became a kind of a mini resistance hero. I have a nothing. Blanche here kind of ends it with a good line. I have a spoiler alert. There is nothing wrong with trying to influence an election, Blanche said. It's called a democracy, he continued. They put something sinister on this idea as if it were a crime. You'll learn that it's not. So, again, that's essentially what it centers around. All these kind of really scummy things that Trump decided to do in the wake of the election, from the porn star payment to the catch and kill stories to all this, shady stuff with, Michael Cohen and the National Enquirer and all that. This is essentially what he's on trial for, this $130,000 campaign contribution, kind of chief among them, this effort to influence the outcome of election through improper means. I personally don't think, politically, or legally it seems like it has, kind of a good chance, but politically I think it will kind of land in a dud because it really fits into a lot of people's opinions about Trump. It's stuff they already know about Trump, and they think, wait, he's just being tried for being a sleazebag. Like, he may still be a sleazebag and he may still be tried, but I think people are going to be very uncomfortable, especially before the election, with anything happening to the course of his candidacy. I think the maximum jail sentence for this was like 4 years. I think people are going to be very uncomfortable with anything happening with regards to that. A lot more people, because they'll be like, yeah, he's a bad guy, but to really not let him run for president because of this, when we all kind of know it about him, I think that just will not go over well. All right, all we got for you guys today. This has been Newsflash.